week is a divisive but important figure in our Unitarian history. In fact, our own social hall here at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City, Eliot Hall, is named after him. Today, we're looking at the life and impact of Samuel Atkins Eliot. Samuel's family's Unitarian legacy begins long before his birth. A third-generation Unitarian, his grandfather, Samuel Atkins Eliot I, was a businessman, founder of the Handel and Hayden Choir Society in Boston and mayor of Boston. His uncle, Charles William Eliot, revolutionized Harvard as its president. Even before his birth, Samuel was born into a family accustomed to power. Born on August 24, 1862, Samuel lost his mother early in his life at the age of 6. He did not attend any formal school. Instead, he followed his father and uncle into classes at the family alma mater, Harvard. While never loving school, he formally graduated from Harvard in 1884. After spending some time in Europe, Samuel entered Harvard Divinity School in 1885. While still in seminary, the American Unitarian Association sent him out west as a missionary. He was to find pulpits to preach in and stir up the crowds to start their own Unitarian congregations. His first stop was in the Pacific Northwest, in and around the bustling Seattle area. Wanting to finish his degree, Samuel went back to Harvard and finished by 1889. He accepted a call out west again at the Unity Church in Denver. He saw a need for more direct institutional support for the small and often poorly organized liberal churches in the West. From Denver, he began 2 new churches, one in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and the one I am sitting in right now, the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. He founded the Rocky Mountain Conference of Churches, thus starting institutional support and structure in these churches of the Wild West. By this point, Samuel had married Frances Hopkinson and begun his family, and by all accounts was a very hands-on father. Wanting to be back east though, Samuel accepted a call to the Church of the Savior, a congregation in Brooklyn, New York. In 1894, he began serving on the American Unitarian Association Board of Directors. With his strong support and leadership, the association finally reconciled with the National Conference of Churches. This settled a decades-long rift between the 2 organizations that had begun nearly 50 years earlier with Theodore Parker. The radical humanists and the traditionalists were finally in agreement again. Wanting to control the production of spiritual resources for liberal churches, Samuel created the publishing arm of the American Unitarian Association, which is still in operation today. Samuel, seeing himself fully now in the work of the American Unitarian Association, left congregational life in 1898 to become the highest executive of the association at the time, its executive secretary. By 1900, he had successfully worked with the rest of the board to consolidate the structure and powers of the board and became its new executive president. He believed that the vision of the American Unitarian Association was to be the ones to set the agenda for the denomination, not individual churches. That it was the duty of the association to, quote, solve problems of the common good, to lead men out of isolated, self-centered interests, in the brave, self-effacing service of the modern world. Samuel wanted a world where there was specific, defined, separate faith traditions. This is actually in direct contrast to his father, who at Harvard was teaching the idea that eventually, through spiritual development, all faiths would kind of just blend in and merge into one spiritual whole. Samuel was afraid, though, that if Christian churches of other faiths began to adopt Unitarian and Universalist principles, he was clear about this, membership would decline. This was interesting foreshadowing, as traditional Universalist theology of God's love for all people has been adopted in progressive Christianity widely. Church membership across the United States in all denominations has fallen. So we cannot make a direct correlation, but it's interesting that this was even a concern of his. Again, Samuel's desire for structure and control to ensure the viability of Unitarian churches is seen even here. At the beginning of his tenure at the association, there were all kinds of Unitarian churches throughout the United States. There were the great big stately cathedral-like churches in large cities like Boston and New York. And there were also teeny tiny roadside churches. Samuel wanted churches to approach their governance in a more of a church as a business model. The American Unitarian Association would fund new construction of churches, but only if they would repay them. Samuel believed that this could happen best if churches were consolidated around universities and suburban areas of large cities. He systematically created policies making it difficult, if not impossible, for small rural churches to survive. What was the impact? Well, this model excluded lower socioeconomic communities, as well as communities of color that could not establish churches. The result is seen and felt in our congregations today, which are predominantly still in university and suburban neighborhoods, with nearly 78% of its members being white, from a Pew Forum survey from 2015. We live the history of our forebears, even today. Another structure set in place that has had lasting effects on the denomination was the creation of the Department of Ministry. Eliot believed that ministers preferably would receive their education from established seminaries, like Harvard. And wanting, though, to increase the ministerial support throughout the country, he wanted a seminary in the West so people could be as educated as they were in the East. So he actually pushed for the creation of a new seminary in California, which is now known as the Starr King School for Ministry. The Department of Ministry also adopted stringent credentialing requirements. The requirements were by design enacted to push out women and people of color from the ministry. This discrimination led to the almost complete removal of women from the ministry, which is still felt today. With all of the controversy surrounding his presidency, Samuel was still beloved amongst Unitarians. His vision for a strong, progressive denomination throughout the United States led to stability and structure. Samuel retired in 1935, but continued to remain active in Unitarian issues and politics until his death in 1950. His legacy has affected the life of every modern-day Unitarian Universalist congregation, for better and for worse. To find out more famous UUs, please visit our website, uuoftheweek.org.